It's about 3,000 years before you were born. You're standing in a marketplace in ancient Mesopotamia. There's no wallet in your pocket because there's no pocket, and there's definitely no wallet. There's a guy over there with 3 goats. There's a woman over there who really needs a goat and has a surplus of barley. And somehow, someway, this entire chaotic mess of people needing exactly the right thing from exactly the right person at exactly the right time has to turn into a functioning economy. No apps, no banks, no cash register. Just people, goods, and an enormous amount of trust. And somewhere in the middle of that mess, a species figured out one of the strangest tricks it has ever pulled off. It decided that certain objects, shells, metal discs, pieces of paper, later just numbers on a screen, could stand in for value itself. This is the story of why humans invented money, not because a king woke up one morning and declared it into existence, but because human society hit a wall it couldn't get past any other way. And once that wall came down, nothing about human civilization would ever look the same again. Here's the thing, almost everybody gets wrong about money, and it's worth clearing up before we go any further. You've probably heard the story. Ancient people bartered goods directly, chickens for shoes, fish for pottery, and this system was clunky and annoying, so eventually someone invented money to fix it. It's a clean story. It's the story in most economics textbooks. It is also, according to a growing mountain of anthropological evidence, largely a myth. Adam Smith told this version back in 1776, and generations of economists repeated it without checking whether it was actually true. Anthropologists who've spent decades studying pre-monetary societies have found something very different. Pure barter economies, where strangers trade goods directly with no money involved, essentially don't show up in the historical record as a dominant system anywhere. Explorers who went looking for these mythical barter societies kept coming home empty-handed. They found gift economies instead, systems that ran on memory and obligation, not spot trades between strangers. So if it wasn't barter, what was it? The answer is debt, specifically social debt. In small, tightly knit communities, the kind humans lived in for the overwhelming majority of our history, you didn't need money because you didn't need to settle accounts on the spot. If your neighbor needed grain and you had extra, you gave it to them. Not because you were generous in some abstract sense, but because everyone understood that the favor would be returned eventually. Maybe not with grain, maybe with labor during harvest, or protection during a raid, or a daughter married into your family. Anthropologists call this a gift economy, and it runs on memory, obligation, and reputation instead of currency. It works beautifully at small scale. Everyone knows everyone. Everyone remembers who owes what. The problem is, what happens when your society gets too big for that memory to hold? Picture a village of 40 people. Everyone can track every favor, every debt, every slight in their heads. Now picture a city of 40,000 people, full of strangers who've never met. That trader from 3 valleys over doesn't know you. He doesn't know if you're honest. Social memory, the invisible ledger that held gift economies together, simply cannot scale to that size. This is exactly the environment where the very first proto-money systems start showing up, in the temple economies of ancient Sumer. The oldest evidence we have of something functioning like money comes from Mesopotamia, roughly 5,000 years ago, and it wasn't coins, it was barley. Sumerian temple and palace administrations used barley as a standardized unit of account, alongside silver measured by weight, called a shekel. Clay tablets from this period, thousands of them, record debts, wages, and prices. A worker's daily wage might be recorded as a specific measure of barley. Money, in its earliest known form, wasn't primarily a physical object you carried around. It was an accounting system, a shared unit that let a massive impersonal bureaucracy keep track of who owed what to whom. The coins came later. The idea came first. Money didn't start as a thing, it started as a record. Long before Mesopotamia, humans were already experimenting with the idea of a shared token of value. Across huge stretches of Africa, Asia, and the Americas, one object shows up again and again, cowrie shells. Small, glossy, almost impossible to counterfeit, and light enough to carry in bulk. They didn't have any practical use beyond decoration. You couldn't eat one, couldn't build with one. Their entire value came from scarcity, portability, and collective agreement. Break that agreement, flood a region with cheap shells, and the value collapses instantly. On the tiny Micronesian island of Yap, islanders used enormous carved limestone discs called rise stones as currency. Some of these stones were over 3 meters wide and weighed several tons. You could not put a rise stone in your pocket. You often could not even move it. Ownership of a rai stone could change hands without the stone physically moving at all. Everyone on the island simply knew and agreed that a particular enormous rock belonged to a particular family now. In one documented case, a stone at the bottom of the ocean after a shipwreck was still considered valid currency. The value was never really in the rock. The value was in the collective agreement about who owned it. So we've established two things. Money solves a trust problem between strangers, and money doesn't actually need to be physically useful or even physically movable to work. The next major leap happened in the Kingdom of Lydia, around the 7th century BC. Lydian metalworkers began minting standardized coins out of electrum, stamped with an official mark guaranteeing their weight and purity. Before standardized coinage, every transaction involving precious metal required someone to weigh it and test its purity every single time. A stamped coin removed that friction entirely. The king's mark did the trust work for you. Coinage spread rapidly from Lydia across the Greek world and beyond. If barter wasn't the real origin story, then what actually was money for at its core? Economic anthropologists argue that money and debt are almost inseparable, and debt is almost inseparable from power. Ancient Mesopotamian rulers periodically declared full debt forgiveness across their kingdoms, wiping the slate clean. Unpaid debt could snowball out of control, trapping farmers in cycles that could end in slavery. The person who could issue currency, or forgive debt, or demand it, held real power over everyone using that currency. In the Roman world, soldiers were sometimes partly paid in salt. The word for that payment gave us the modern word salary, and the phrase, worth your salt. Whatever a society already agreed was valuable tended to become the thing that eventually got standardized into currency. Money rarely invents value from nothing. It usually borrows value that already existed. Why does this trick even work on us? Humans are the only animals that reliably cooperate at scale, with total strangers, based on shared belief in things that don't physically exist. A dollar bill is worth exactly as much as everyone around you agrees it's worth, and not 1 cent more. The moment that collective belief cracks, the money becomes worthless almost overnight. In Weimar Germany in 1923, the value of the mark collapsed so catastrophically that people needed wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. Prices could double within a matter of hours. There are accounts of people burning stacks of banknotes for warmth because firewood had become more valuable than the currency meant to buy it. What failed was belief. The collective agreement that the paper represented real value simply evaporated. Money has been slowly, steadily dematerializing for thousands of years. Paper money itself started in Tang and Song Dynasty China as a lightweight, promissory note, representing coins held safely elsewhere. Marco Polo wrote home in astonishment that the Chinese emperor could turn the bark of a tree into something people accepted as readily as pure gold. Cryptocurrency is simply the newest chapter in a 5,000-year trend line that has always been pointing in exactly this direction, away from the object, toward the agreement. So why did humans invent money? Money emerged because human societies outgrew the size where memory alone could hold a community together. Every form money has ever taken has been solving the exact same underlying problem in a slightly different costume. The same invention that lets strangers trust each other enough to build cities is also the same invention that has trapped people in debt. So next time you tap your card, remember, you're participating in a 5,000-year-old trust exercise between strangers agreeing to believe in something that isn't really there.